Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the second set of regulations that we are reviewing this morning. The first one that we reviewed is the Draft Civil Aviation Radio Navigation Aids Regulations. We are now going through the Draft Civil Aviation Communication Procedures Regulations 2021. We will be having our chief CNS inspector taking us through this particular set of regulations, Mr. Potas Oganga. Just before we start, I want to remind you again that we are requesting for your feedback on the platform that we used for purposes of hosting this public participation forum, as well as the conduct of the public participation forum. So on the top right hand side of your screen, there is a polls section. Kindly fill it in and let us have your feedback for purposes of improvement in future stakeholder participation forums. We also have the questions tab. You are kindly requested to indicate any of your comments there. In case you wish to be given the floor, please indicate so, and you shall be given the stage for purposes of addressing this forum. We are also receiving input and comments through the dedicated KCAA email address, which is KCAS 2021. That's KCARS 2021 at kcaa.or.ke. If you're following us live on Facebook, please also, you can indicate your wish to make a comment or let us have your questions, and the same will be responded to by the panelists that we have ahead of us. So I'll give the stage to Mr. Potas Oganga to take us through the next set of regulations that we are reviewing, which is the Draft Civil Aviation Communication Procedures Regulations. Welcome, Bwana Oganga.
Okay, thank you, Dennis. So welcome everybody to this particular session on the regulation review for communication procedures regulations. So just to remind you, these particular regulations were published in 2018, and then we had some amendments to ICAO and Extend Volume 2, on which they are anchored. We had a review, an amendment which became applicable in November 2018. So as a result of the changes, in this occasion, the need to have the reviews to accordingly to incorporate the new requirements accordingly. So the other reason for review is actually on cases where we had some errors here and there, some omissions, and also the need to make some realignments. So at this juncture, I would want to appreciate the memoranda I've received from some of the stakeholders. We have a memorandum from Manager Aeronautical Information Services, KCA, and we also have another one from the Head of Aeronautical Communications, KCA. So we'll be able to address some of the issues maybe at the end of this presentation. So looking at the changes which have been effected or which are proposed to be effected in the reviewed regulations, the first change, looking at the matrix, is on Regulation 1, that is the citation. This is just a change in the year. The current regulations were promulgated in 2018, and we expect these reviewed regulations to be promulgated in 2021. So we have that change from 2018 to 2021. Then part 2 of these regulations, the current regulations have the title as general requirements, and it was felt that this was not very specific to these particular regulations, as I needed to be more specific to indicate that the kind of services which are being provided. So this has been amended. The title of this particular part has been amended to read General Requirements for Provision of CNS Services. So there's the addition for provision of CNS services to the title of these regulations. Another change which we are proposing to again make this very specific to CNS provision is that in the current regulations, we have a lot of reference to air navigation services provider in this regulation. Here again, we wanted to be very specific because communication services are part of CNS services, that's communication, navigation, and surveillance services. So instead of being too general, just like we have with the other air navigation service regulations like ATS, AIS, reference is made to that particular provider. Like ATS regulations, we say ATS services provider shall, AIS service provider shall. So again here for CNS, in order to have that uniformity, instead of making reference to air navigation services provider, so we have changed anywhere where we have air navigation services provider to read CNS provider. In Regulation 2, interpretation, following the Amendment 91 to the ICAO and Extend Volume 2, there were some new definitions which came up. So we have a definition like of standard message element, means part of the message defined in the PANS ATM in terms of display format, intended use, and attributes. So this particular new definition has been included in interpretation. Similarly, we have the use of the word ATSEP in the regulations, but it was not defined. CNS now appears because they are now, instead of NSP, Air Navigation Service Provider, we are replacing it with CNS. So we have the full, the meaning, or not really the meaning, but the acronym, what it stands for. So CNS means communication, navigation, and surveillance. So that has been put in the interpretation. Then we had something which was in the annex, in Annex 10 Volume 2, which we did not, which we missed in the regulations, the definition of CPL-DLC message. So this definition of CPL-DLC has been incorporated in the proposed reviewed regulations. So another definition which was missed is a CPL-DLC message set to mean a list of standard message elements and free text message elements. And similarly, we also missed logo and address. So all these definitions have been included in the regulation 2, that is interpretation of these regulations. Now, Regulation 13, with the title Operations Manual. So we had some mix up in the rearrangement of some of these regulations. So as a result, there's a regulation regarding there's a regulation which was in regard to security of systems. So in that particular title of the regulations operations manual, there was this sub-regulation about system security, CNS systems and services. The service provider shall ensure that CNS systems and services are protected against service attacks to a level consistent with the application requirements. So we noted that this particular regulation was actually out of place. So it was actually wrongly put in Regulation 13. So it has accordingly been moved to Regulation 14 as Sub-Regulation 7, where it fits. Then same Regulation 13, so there's been that change from air navigation service provider to the CNS provider. And also there was Regulation 4 and 5, which were not following each other it was not logical the way they were arranged. So there's one which was supposed to appear before the other. 5 actually was supposed to appear before 4, and uh, this has now been changed so that now what was initially 5 is sub-regulation 4, and what was initially sub-regulation 4 is sub-regulation 5. Then there's Regulation 17 on radio frequency reporting, or radio frequency management and interference reporting. So here there was an element of also fault reporting for general systems. So it was talking about service providers shall establish procedures for reporting, collection, and notification of facility malfunction incidents and safety incidents. And then sub-regulation 3 is the one which was talking about frequency reporting. So these two regulations seem not to, they actually were not interrelated. So what was done is that regulation 17 has been divided into 2 regulations. So one with the title radio frequency management and interference reporting, and then the other part of that regulation has the title now facility malfunction incident and operational status of CNS systems, so that we separate the 2 requirements so that it becomes clearer. Oh, so actually it was a long regulation, so that's why you can see in the old text we have quite a lot of material covering a number of pages, so that's why also we decided to subdivide it. Okay, they then move to Regulation 22 with the title Hours of Service. So the old text read that the authority shall give notification of maybe their times of or the hours of operation. But as you know, this was the text in the annex, but the annex, you are supposed to transpose the standards when you are doing your national regulations. So there was a mistake. Actually, it's not the authority which is supposed to give the notification on their times of operation, but it's whoever is providing the service. So we replace the word authority with the CNS provider. So it's the service provider to give this information and not the authority. So that is the change for that particular regulation. Again, on the hours of service, same regulation 22, we did some rephrasing. So regulation 22, sub-regulation 3 was beginning with the word if. If a station of the International Aeronautical Telecommunication Service. So the linguistics told us that if is not a good word to start a regulation. So he started it with the word where a station of the international aeronautical telecommunication. So the if has been replaced with where. So this is just a rephrasing of that particular sub-regulation. Then regulation 33 on supervision. So the current regulations read that Kenya shall designate the authority responsible for ensuring the International Aeronautical Telecommunication Service is conducted in accordance with these regulations. So it was noted that this was not proper, so it was improperly phrased. So this has been modified to read the authority instead of Kenya. It said the authority, that is the CA, shall designate a service provider. So Kenya cannot designate the authority, and the authority is actually acting on behalf of the government of Kenya. So it's the authority which shall designate a service provider to carry out or to provide the services. Then subregulation. This is subregulation 3. Again, it was some improper phrasing, so this has been rephrased. So the rephrasing actually, if I maybe allow me, I can read the whole sentence. What was there earlier and what is there currently. So subregulation 3, when a station commits serious or repeated infringements, representations relating to them shall be made to the authority as specified in subregulation 1, to which the station belongs, by the authority which detects them. Then the proposed new text is, when a station commits serious or repeated infringements, sorry, I moved too fast. Okay, so I think I moved too fast. When a station commits serious or repeated infringements, representation relating to them shall be made to the authority as specified in subregulation 1, to which the station belongs, by the CNS provider which detects them. So here the regulations are talking to the service provider, but a report will be made to the authority. So you cannot report the authority to the authority as earlier put in the old or in the current regulations. So subregulation 4, to that again, in the old regulation, we had the authority designated in subregulation 1 shall exchange information regarding performance of systems of communication, radio navigation. So this one, instead of the authority designated as is indicated in the annex and in the current regulations, it is the service provider which will be designated to provide the communication services. Then regulation number 28, with the transmission and delivery of messages. This just a rephrasing of the regulation. So again, this was talking about the authority shall prescribe a form of written record of other permanent means of delivering messages. So it's the CNS provider who is supposed to develop a form on how they want to deliver or how messages are supposed to be written before the transmission and delivery. So it's not the authority to do that, it's the service provider. A new standard which came up following Amendment 91 to the volume 2 of Annex 10 was incorporated in Subregulation 5 under transmission and delivery of messages. So this particular amendment reads that in cases where telephone or loudspeaker systems are used without recording facilities for delivery of messages, a written copy shall be provided as a confirmation of the delivery. And then we have subregulation 9 and 10. These are new requirements or new standards which we have accordingly incorporated. Then regulation 37, this is on operations of MET in relation to FTN and MHS. So following the introduction of ATS message handling services systems, that is MHS, to replace the FTN. So there was an amendment to incorporate the MHS systems when it comes to operating with the meteorological service channels. So under this regulation 37, the introduction of MHS operations has been included to take care of that. So this provides now for FTN operations and also for MHS operations. Then regulation 56, general procedures for aeronautical mobile service voice communication services. So the word authority has been deleted and the regulation refreshed. So we are talking about a standardized phraseology here. So we are saying the authority standardized phraseology shall be used in all situations for which it has been specified. So the CAO, the authority doesn't have a phraseology, but ICAO has. So instead of using the authority standardized phraseology, you just say standardized phraseology shall be used in all situations for which it has been specified. So the word authority has been deleted there. And then we then move to the schedules. So there are some updates on some of the tables. So like there was a replacement of a table in the 5th schedule to comply with the requirements of amendment to the annex, to Annex 10 Volume 2. So there was an update of this particular table which you can see regarding how you put in aircraft call signs, how you read wind, then how you transmit runway, like runway transmitted as that. Then there's another table which has been included with the standard requirements on flight levels, how they'll be transmitted. So flight levels shall be transmitted by pronouncing each digit separately, except for cases of flight levels in whole hundreds, which shall be transmitted by pronouncing the digit of the whole hundred followed by the word 100. So we have a table with the examples of how your flight levels shall be read. Then there's also the amendment regarding the altimeter settings, how they'll be transmitted. That is on subparagraph 8. So I have some text which is hidden there, but for altimeter settings, if you have 100, of course, it indicates how it will be read. So that table should be available. And then we have all numbers used in the transmission of transponder codes again, how they'll be transmitted, how they'll be pronounced. Again, you have the table which is below it. indicating that pronouncing the numbers in thousands followed by the word 1,000. So we have the examples in the table, which is in the text or in the proposed regulation. So some of what I'm presenting, I think there's a column which has cut off some parts of the table, but if you go to the website, you can be able to get the full text. So we have the table for reading the transporter codes as an example. And then we have in the fifth schedule, there's a new provision which has been included in paragraph 2, subparagraph 11, when providing information regarding relative bearing to an object or to conflicting traffic in terms of 12-hour clock, the information shall be given by pronouncing the double digits as 10, 11, 12, etc. o'clock. So as a result of this, we have reviewed actually the introduction of some of the new regulations. We have reviewed the numbering of the regulations and also numbering in some of the paragraphs within the schedules. So that brings me to the end of the presentation of the matrix of changes for the civil aviation communication procedures regulations. So thank you very much for listening. And as I said earlier, we have a memorandum from
Okay, thank you very much, Bwana Potas Oganga, for taking us through the this set of regulations, being the draft civil aviation communication procedures regulations. Probably just before we get into the next section, which is the response on the answers that the response from the comments that we have received so far, both submitted through the dedicated KCA email address, that's kcas2021 at kcaa.or.ke, as well as the different other modes, but still received at KCAA. We'd want to still invite the participants in case you intend to make any presentations, kindly indicate so under the questions tab. Then you will be able to get your your comments addressed or your inquiries addressed. In case you want to take the floor for purposes of giving any verbal presentations, kindly indicate so, and the stage will be given for you to address this particular forum. So we are inviting any questions. I can see there is a remark from Tom Oteo on seems our proposals were excluded. Probably we'll have the panelists responding to this. But in the meantime, if you have not yet sent your input or records, kindly let us have the same sent through the dedicated email address, which is KCARS 2021 at kcaa.or.ke. The same has been put for ease of reference. So right now we will be inviting Bwana Potas Oganga to take us through the comments that we have received so far. Probably some of these comments that are being raised by Bwana Tom Oteo might be addressed in the course of the response to the comments that we have received so far. So Bwana Oganga, kindly take the stage.
Okay, thank you very much, Dennis. So Tom Oteo, I see your comment seems our proposals were excluded. So what we are presenting today is the reviewed regulations as well as they were put in the website some 2-3 weeks ago. So the comments which we received, because I think we received this in the course of this week. So all these comments that we received in the course of the week, or even during these presentations, or even after, will all be reviewed and where necessary, or they'll be incorporated accordingly. So at this particular time, we have not incorporated any of the proposals, but they'll be reviewed and they'll be incorporated accordingly. So maybe looking at some of the comments which you sent earlier, so there was actually a proposal to update Regulation 7, Sub-Regulation 1, to read that the authority shall carry out safety inspections and audits on CNS facilities, documents, records, and operations. So initially it was stopping at records, so you actually propose that we include, or the word operations also be included to take care of the COM operations. So I think that is very much in order, and during the time of incorporation of the comments, this should be incorporated accordingly. Then there is a proposal for Regulation 8, Sub-Regulation 2, where you actually requested that we add, or that particular regulation reads: the facilities in Sub-Regulation 1 shall be installed by licensed ATSEPs with the relevant ratings for the facilities and operated by licensed aeronautical station operator with the relevant qualifications and rating. Very much in order, and this one will be incorporated accordingly. Even the proposal number 3. So the only issue which I think we'll need to discuss with the personnel licensing is your proposal on the issue on the procedures for licensing of aeronautical communication personnel. So you have proposed a detailed procedure here, which you requested to be included in the regulations as the 7th schedule. So this talks about issue, renewal, and reissue of aeronautical station operator license. So this particular bit is actually in the Department of PEL, issues of licenses, renewal of licenses, and reissue of licenses. So the only thing you can do now for the COM procedures regulations is to have that requirement for licensing. Now, when it comes to the details of the licensing itself, I propose that we liaise with the PEL, and that is what also the ATSEPs have done, so that they have the issue of their licensing, the details, and everything else included in the PEL regulations. So this again can be followed after these particular presentations. So that, so I hope that answers your concerns in regard to the COM procedures regulation, Mr. Oteo. Then you've said MHS rides on FTN, so the change is not relevant. So I don't know exactly what you mean here. What I know is that we have had FTN all along. Then MHS has come in as a new technology to replace FTN. So the two work using different protocols. So having the inclusion of the word MHS, or the requirements to have MHS in the regulations format, I don't think there should be an issue. But you have said you have requested to be given the floor to make your remarks or further input. I'll ask the Dennis to be able to give you the floor. So, but before he does that, we have also we had some input from manager AIS. So manager AIS has proposed inclusion of some definitions in the interpretation, a definition of AIP, which are used in the document or in the regulations, the definition of the NOTAM. These ones are very much in order, so these ones will be done. In regulation 16, they proposed the wording of the regulation. Instead of saying conduct a yearly review of the training plan for each staff, they have proposed that we use the word annual, conduct an annual review This is linguistics. I think some people here went to some good schools. I think annual reviews is better than yearly review. Then regulation 28, sub-regulation 3, you are saying the way we have tried to transpose the standard of the annex is like the meaning has been distorted. So you have actually quoted what is in the annex, the authority in control of any station. And as you have used a service, CNS service provider, if you remember, I had some explanation earlier on when I was explaining the reason why you are replacing the authority with the CNS service provider. So it's not the authority who is in control of the station, but actually the service provider. But again, with our legal guys and the drafters, we can look at the way this particular standard has been transposed so that it does not lose the meaning or it doesn't get distorted as you suggested. So we look at it, we look at it, and if possible, reward it accordingly. So 28, so there's a proposal there, instead of using except where special arrangements have been made with a CNS provider, or you're proposing that instead of using a CNS provider, we use the CNS provider concerned. So again, the drafters will ask the drafters to guide us on this, whether to use a or the. Same regulation 28, a single office for each aircraft operating agency shall be designated by the agreement between a CNS provider and the aircraft operating agency concerned for each station. Again, you're saying the meaning of this has been distorted. So we'll look at it with the legal people and the drafters. 50, you say the procedure is obsolete. Yeah, maybe this could have been overlooked. Again, we can look at it, a procedure for error detection and transmission. So this I think was used maybe during the teleprinter type. So this can again be looked at. Then regulation 57, 58, and 59. You say the service moved to ATM and has been overtaken by events. So MH service no longer availed by communications operations. So I think you're talking about operations of HF, the HF, the booth which was moved from the HF booth to the ATC center. So maybe I could say at this point, as much as the service is being offered by ATM, it doesn't mean that the regulations need to be moved to ATM regulations. So the regulations can still remain or in the COM procedures regulations, because all these regulations are actually interlinked. The fact that maybe you are in AIS or ATM doesn't mean you don't go to read. If you want to provide another service which could be related to AIS, it doesn't mean you don't go to read the AIS regulation. So this one I think will maintain the regulations in the COM procedures regulation, but even if there is the ATM personnel offering the services, then they still need to be offered or provided as per the provisions of the regulations of the COM procedures. So those are my comments regarding the two memorandum that we received from Manager AIS and Head of Communications at KCA. Thank you. Back to moderator.
Thank you very much, Oganga, for taking us through the set of regulations. That's the Draft Civil Aviation Communication Procedures Regulations 2021. As has been pointed out, we will be having opportunity to see the final set of regulations incorporating all the changes, be they typographical or going into the substance of the regulation itself. From the questions provision, I think there has been an adequate response on the comments that have been raised by Bwana Tom Otero. I can see saying that I'm okay with the presentation. I have no more input. Thank you very much, Bwana Tom Otero. And we continue to remind you that we are here to receive your comments and input to enable us have a set of regulations that reflect also the wishes of the industry as well as the ensuring safety and security is observed. So still requesting any additional comments just before we go on break to get to the next set of regulations, which is the draft civil aviation air traffic services regulations, which will be presented by our senior aeronautical telecommunication officer, Bwana Evans Ogochi. So we still are requesting for any additional input and comments on this set of regulations that has been presented. In case you have any comments on earlier regulations that have been presented to date, that's from Monday, you are kindly requested to indicate the same under the questions tab, and you will be given an opportunity to either address the meeting or the question or comment itself will be directed to the appropriate panelist for purposes of getting responses appropriate. So I can see we're just getting to the top of the hour. It's now 9:58. We'll still be open to receive any comments under the questions section, as well as under the questions section. I can't see any at the moment, so but we are still open to receive any additional input on the same. If you still need some more time, there is the dedicated KCAA email address, kcas2021@kcaa.or.ke. We really appreciate the comments that we have been receiving so far. The input has been quite overwhelming. The registration and participation in this particular exercise that we have been undertaking from Monday has been quite encouraging, and the hiccups that have been there have been resolved and addressed by the KCAA. So, ladies and gentlemen, as we get to the top of the hour, we'll be requesting for a 5 minutes break to enable us transition to the next presenter, who is Mr. Evans Ogochi, who will be taking us through the draft civil aviation air traffic services regulation. In order to join the next link, kindly follow the link that is here for purposes of transitioning into the next session. Okay, just hold on. Ladies and gentlemen, kindly allow me to make a correction here. The next session will be resuming at the next session will be resuming at 10:30. This is the draft civil aviation air traffic services regulations by our chief CNS inspector, Bwana Evans. No, sorry, by our senior air traffic aeronautical telecommunication officer, Mr. Evans Ogochi. So we resume back at 10:30. We have posted the link to enable you access the next session, which is the draft civil aviation air traffic services regulations, resuming from 10:30. So let's have a 30 minutes break before we transition into the next session. Asanteni sana, and please remember to follow the link. Thank you.